So I'm going to start by calling our director and advisor for ETM and partnerships. And he'll start off the session with some introductory remarks, and then we'll pass it to our moderator, Lizina Rahman, to really take us into the thick of the program as well. So Andy, welcome you up to the stage.
So good morning, everyone. Welcome to this event on ADB's Energy Transition Mechanism. In 2021, we launched this Energy Transition Mechanism, or ETM, a program that utilizes concessional and commercial capital from various public and private sources to incentivize the early retirement of coal-fired power plants or other carbon-intensive power generation, while also unleashing new investments in clean energy and the required grid modernization and energy storage. So the impetus of the ETM is that coal-fired power plants constitute the single largest source of greenhouse gas emissions from all of human activity. Another way to look at this going forward in terms of a carbon budget is regarding how much more carbon the atmosphere can absorb before we blow through the targets to keep global warming within what we hope are realistic levels. And coal-fired power plants take up an alarmingly large portion of that future overall emissions. So early closure or refurbishing of such plants and their replacement with clean energy sources is the specific problem that the ETM program addresses. And believe me, it's not easy. The average coal plants in the Southeast Asia region, for example, are 15 years old, meaning they have significant useful lives left. While the average plant in North America or Europe is over 45 years old, meaning they've been depreciated financially, economically, investors have earned their returns, it's just they're easier to retire. Add to that the fast-growing economies in the region and the acute need for continuing growth of power generation supply. And there are also a myriad level of complexities with each and every one of these transactions. So one interesting feature of this program is that those working on it here at the Asian Development Bank come together from different groups and different departments around the bank. We have core team members, we have private sector deal transactors, we have markets development experts raising funds and working on carbon market solutions to promote the program. We have experts on the just transition and how to address the loss of livelihoods associated with the transition, and among others. So we're all working very closely together on this initiative. So to share our experiences for this program, which started in Southeast Asia and has since expanded, we have a double feature this morning. Both of our two sessions are moderated by my colleague, Lizina Rahman, an ETM warrior based in our Jakarta office. And the first session will share some of our joys and sorrows from our colleagues eyeball deep in the ETM trenches. And given the complex endeavors, such complex endeavors don't happen without coalitions and partners. We have a close friend of ours who runs the Secretariat of the Indonesia Just Energy Transition Partnership. As our team supports that JETP, and early coal retirement is one of the investment pillars under that initiative as well. After the break, the second half of this session, we're going to hear from some of our key government counterparts to get their perspectives on their challenges, their country contexts, their impressive programs, and how we're working to support them. So there'll be Q&A after each of these, the first and the second session, and we hope to have a really fruitful engagement with you all. We want to raise awareness of this program and build understanding and partnerships so that we all and all the co-collaborators that this program relies on can collectively move this whole agenda forward. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lizina. Thank you. I hope you have a good, fruitful morning. Thank you.
So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lizzie Arman, and I'm the Deputy Team Lead for ETM based in Jakarta. It's my pleasure to welcome you here today on our first panel, which is going to be focused on our key technical work streams for ETM. I'd like to now start by welcoming all the panelists on stage. As I call your name, please come up. So at first, let me introduce David Alzinga, our fearless ETM team lead and principal energy specialist under the ADB's Energy Sector Office. David has worked in sustainability and climate change fields for over 25 years. And prior to ADB was at the UN and the IEA. As a skilled engineer and communicator, he has worked in over 50 countries promoting the use of sustainable technology for impact. Next up, we have Dion Kamangan, Senior Markets Development Advisory Specialist at the Office of Markets Development and Public-Private Partnership. Dion brings over 17 years of experience across banking and finance. Prior to joining ADB, Dion was based in Singapore and has worked at Temasek, MUFG, and PwC. Next, we have Swati D'Souza. Swati is a climate change specialist and the Just Transition Focal for ETM and other energy and transport sector related activities. Prior to joining ADB, Swati was the lead analyst and coordinator for the IEA in India. She developed the Just Transition and Critical Mineral Workstream for IFA and co-founded the India ZEV Center on Clean Transport in the University of California, Davis. Last but not least, let me welcome our longtime ADB collaborator, Paul Butar-Butar, the head of the JETP Secretariat in Indonesia. Paul has been involved in transportation and energy-related air pollution, municipal solid waste, renewable energy, industrial decarbonization, and climate change for over 32 years, with core expertise centered around carbon market and carbon pricing. We will now, I think we will start with a few words from David to provide an overall update from the ETM program.
Well, thank you, Lizina, and it's a pleasure to be here to talk about ETM today. And Andy, I think, provided an excellent overview and you know, as to why we're doing this. So that's going to allow me to kind of go through the first couple slides rather quickly and go into more detail in some of the granularity in terms of all the work that we're doing for ETM. Now, this Andy summarized this really well. I just want to repeat kind of one high-level point and why we're doing this. If we don't find a way to accelerate the retirement of existing coal-fired power plants, we won't meet global climate goals. So, you know, I really want to set the tone with that point because this is challenging. This really is a difficult thing. In some respects, we could say we're destroying economic value. But we're doing that in a way because we can provide electricity through new ways and reduce the issues around emissions and pollution. So that really provides the overarching theme for this. And again, we're learning by doing. And this has been a little bit of a scary process, I would say. ADB doesn't traditionally talk about new initiatives so deeply throughout the 2 years I guess maybe 3 years, I guess 3 years, time is flying, head down, working hard. Since 2021, where we first announced this at COP26 in partnership with Indonesia and the Philippines, and as well support from Japan, our first supporter, providing us the seed money for ETM. Since then, we've been working very deeply with a range of countries, and you're going to hear about the progress that we've made really deeply with Indonesia, and that's why we have Pak Paul here today speaking on JETP. But again, working to not only do the first work, but really think through how are we going to scale this up over the medium and long term. I think this is really important that we are doing this. And again, we don't have all the answers for how to do this today. But if we don't start, if we don't try to find these solutions, we're not going to get there. And I think that really is what encourages us and keeps us going. Now, Andy highlighted this very briefly when he talked about the age of the plants. When we look globally, so here on this curve, we see that the use of coal in both Europe and the US is going down, but that drop on a global basis is very modest. And you know, when you look at the right side of the curve, there's a good reason why we're starting and really focusing our work in Asia, is that we have very high shares of coal-fired power in systems across a range of countries, and that is with very young plants. So, you know, this is the right area to work, and we are addressing a very significant portion of the climate problem by really trying to figure out how do we, you know, move away, transition from coal-fired power plants as quickly as possible. Now, I heard one of our senior managers yesterday refer to this graph as the chocolate cake versus the matcha. And you know, when it comes to food, you know, I really like that analogy. And so I just want to, you know, we've shown this curve for many years, but I really think it's a great reminder as to what we're trying to do. When we look at the left side of the figure, we see that, you know, existing coal plants are there. If we do nothing under a business as usual, these are going to continue to operate for a very long time. And the consequence of that is not only the emissions that it creates, but it also means less room for deploying renewable energy technologies. And as we look globally, and we've seen as renewables have scaled, they've come down in price, and then the technical integration has also been easier. That moves us to the right side, where if we can retire these plants, get them out of the system earlier, not only do we reduce the emissions, both from a CO2 perspective, but also local air pollution, but we also increase demand for renewables. And so we can further accelerate that deployment, driving down those costs and improving efficiencies and experience in integrating them. And this can also, in the long term, result in lower generation costs. And I think that is something that we always have to be cognizant of. And that's something I hope to get into with respect to the Q&A, is of course energy security and the cost of energy. We can't only be looking at climate. We have to look at the overall context from an economic development perspective holistically. And that's very much part of our DNA as we look at this. And when I talk about holistic approaches, we created something, we call it the 4P, people, policy, power, and partnership. And I think this is really going into that context. For one, while everybody can potentially demonize coal, we also have to acknowledge that there's people who are working in these plants where they obtain their livelihoods and feed their families. They are part of the ecosystem. So we must make sure that we deal with this in a just way. And Swati will get into detail on that later. Policy. Every country has its own policy environment that either supports the deployment of clean energy or supports the use of fossil fuels. There's a history to this. It has to evolve. So we have to look into that and make sure that we acknowledge the policies that exist and help to adjust them to support this transition. We can't ignore the power sector in itself from a technical perspective. And so indeed, we have to make sure that if we retire these plants, what is going to be used to create that electricity that's needed for the economy, and ensure that this can be done in a economical way. Because of course, raising prices has impacts on industry, has impacts on the population, has political impacts. So we have to make sure that that's addressed as well. And Andy highlighted this earlier in terms of partnership. This is not an ADB initiative alone. This is something that we have to do working with the broad energy sector ecosystem, working within the ecosystems in the countries themselves. We can't just say we're going to do this. We have to make sure that we work in partnership and find those solutions in each country that can really work. Because these things affect so many people as across the people, ending on that, the politics, the businesses, the individuals in society themselves. We have to make sure that we do this in partnership so that this can be done in a way that really meets the broad needs of the country. So as we go through this process, we have a number of stages, and I'm not going to go into great detail here, but I just want to highlight that in some countries, there's large shares of coal in the power system. In other countries, there's just a few plants. And in that respect, there are still opportunities across each of these individual countries. And so in some cases, we're going through a very stepped approach with a pre-feasibility study, a feasibility study, pilot transactions, and towards scale up. Other places, we're jumping straight to some pilot transactions because we can do that today. So we see that we're very much looking for opportunities to start this process and then, of course, move on to scaling this up. I know this will be touched on in a number, or in one other presentation today. But I guess what I want to focus on in this slide is really that middle area where we talk about technical assistance, direct ADB transactions, and the ETM funding vehicle, which Dion is going to get into in much greater detail. And I think the key point here is, one, we're appreciative of the funding and the support that we've gotten from our donor community, but really we need to look at this from a study, an analytical approach. We need to do transactions to really get into the details and understand what the issues are, and then really think through that scaling up. We need to work across these areas. We can't just pick one area or the other. We need to really have a long-term plan that goes throughout the broad set of work that needs to be done. Now, my last two slides, I can't cover all this detail. These will be posted on the ASEF site. But I wanted to highlight both on this slide, the thematic work, and the next slide will focus on the countries. But you see the range of activities that we're involved in for this. It is incredibly comprehensive when we look at removing coal plants from the power system and really making sure that we have the resources to do this. We're looking at different levers such as carbon finance and taxonomy. How do we make sure that the financial community can support this? Technical aspects, just transition, safeguards, understanding the past, looking to how we can address environmental and social issues that are associated with these plants. And then, of course, we're not doing this alone. And I look across the audience, I see a number of our different partners here today as well, really trying to find out how we can work together with the broad ecosystem that can support this energy transition. And I think this is my last slide. And I just want to highlight that we've had a significant amount of work in Indonesia, where it's just such a pleasure to work in the country. I'm based there, Lazina's based, and other colleagues. But we are looking across other countries to really make sure that we're providing solutions that are fit for purpose in given countries, but also taking lessons and trying to learn and apply these different aspects across the region. So let me close with one last comment just to say we're here to talk, to learn, to share what we're doing. We don't own this concept. We don't think we have all the answers. I look forward to continued engagement, and we are going to work very hard to make progress on this, but we really look forward to working with all of you, because if we scale this up, we need everybody in the room, everybody in the energy system to work together to accelerate this transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Can we go to Dion to discuss the ETM's fund vehicle? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks. So I think we'll start with the same diagram that David has presented, but we're going to be zooming in more onto the funding vehicle. I think David has spoken earlier about how big is this challenge that we're going to face and what's the potential benefit from a decarbonization perspective that this leads to. So he did mention 200 tons per year. That's what we're looking at if we're able to address 50% of coal capacity in our what we call VIP countries, Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines. From a finance person such as myself, the question always going to boil down to numbers. What does that mean, right? So that 50%, 200 million tons per year means at least 30 billion that we need to mobilize to be able to undertake that activity. And to be quite honest, ADB alone can't do that, right? There is a limit to each of our independent process to address that 30 billion. So the intention of this funding vehicle is to scale the ambition beyond ADB's own balance sheet. How do we mobilize other donor funds? How do we mobilize other concessional funds, as well as the private sector commercial capital to enable us to address that challenge? And that's what we're here to present today. In COP 28 last year, ADB has signed the Memorandum of Understanding with the Monetary Authority of Singapore, as well as the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, to work towards developing the early stages of this platform with an ambition to scale up to $2 billion in a mix of concessional and commercial capital. What this platform will try to do is to crowd in all this capital, work with the private sector to leverage their expertise in terms of structuring, execution, negotiation, to be able to scale up and undertake more similar transactions, both on our carbon retirement facility, or what we use for early coal retirement, as well as in the development of the replacement clean energy projects in our member countries. Right? This platform will try to invite or crowd in as many of the different types of capital available out there that are all working towards the same objective. How do we enable the decarbonization of our energy sector? Okay, just double clicking in terms of what we plan to do on the coal retirement or the carbon reduction facility. As David mentioned, at the heart of the transaction is that we are retiring currently productive assets. That leads to value loss for certain players in our ecosystem. So the CRF facility, or the carbon reduction facility, looks at financing solution to enable us to create value neutral proposition for all the stakeholders in our project. This can be done through different means, right? There could be intervention on the equity side, which is what we put out as the acquisition model. There can be intervention on the debt side, both at the project level, which is what the synthetic model will cover, as well as for the portfolio level, for those companies which are within themselves trying to transition and are able to undertake both the removal of high-emitting plants as well as development of clean energy projects within their own portfolio. Another emerging initiative, which we have not put in the slide, but is something that ADB is also working towards, is how do we mobilize carbon finance to be able to also provide that additional capital that would help us with the reduction in the high-emitting carbon plants. Again, just double-clicking further, what does this mean in substance? So in substance, carbon retirement is a leverage on how do we mobilize capital to lower the cost of capital and re-lever some of these projects or companies to create that value from net present value basis. So to those of us who are more finance inclined, this is really just a numbers game, right? It's a zero-sum modeling game. How do we lower discount rates such that on an MPV basis, all this lines up nicely, we create a zero-sum value proposition. Now, as a finance person, I would honestly say this is the easiest part of it, right? Getting the numbers right is the easiest part of it. But if you can see from the diagram, we have multiple stakeholders that we need to work with to get this transaction right. Right? So the challenge is how do we work with the private sector, with the government, with other stakeholders to make sure that whatever solution we come up with is aligned with the different positions and interests. Right? So it's a little bit like herding cats. Right? It's gonna take a lot of work, but so long as the process move us forward towards an alignment, the financial solution can be found. Right? The capital to support this initiative can be found. But it's the more important concept of this is how does ADB, as well as our partners, work with the ecosystem to move them towards alignment into what would that financial solution look like. Okay, this is relatively something that we have not shared as much, but I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce what does the clean energy proposition of the ETM means. As most of us know, there are tons of clean energy fund out there. Right? And from our survey of the market, from our engagement with the players, there are a few bottlenecks that we have identified why a lot of these clean energy funds are not able to deploy the capital into the projects. Right? One of them primarily is the readiness of projects in the region. While there is an ambition to scale clean energy, our member countries may not have the capability to actually develop projects that are bankable that will be of interest to the private sector. Secondly, and this is also important in energy transition, as what one senior minister mentioned before, transition does not happen without transmission. So there is a significant constraint from transmission capacity in our member countries to enable them to undertake this energy transition and develop more renewable capacity in the region. So these bottlenecks are something that the clean energy facility of the platform will hope to address. The platform will work with our government partners as well as private sector to develop the underlying projects that can come out from this energy transition. As David has mentioned, we have feasibility studies with countries. That should identify for us what are the possible hunting grounds in terms of transactions that can be undertaken for the development of the replacement clean energy. What this fund will do will work with the government to address those bottlenecks in project preparation, in bankability, in terms of transmission enhancement that needs to be done. So that gets us to the projects that are bankable. Now, how do we then crowd in private sector into taking in and making sure that these projects can scale and can be replicated? So that's where the clean energy facility of the platform will look towards seeding some of these transactions with stapled financing. Now, the intention is that this stapled financing should come with the projects at the point of tender or at the point of signing, so that then the value saving from this blended financing can read down to our consumers as each of the private sector that would be willing to tender bid for this project would be able to factor in that cost saving and allow them to bid lower tariff, which moves us towards that just transition that we're talking about, where the replacement power that comes in as a result of this energy transition does not lead to increasing tariff for our consumers. Right? So this is the area in which the platform will look at. As I mentioned earlier, emerging areas such as carbon credit is another possible area where the platform will look towards providing support. Another area which we are considering will be brown to green transition, where we will be looking at other hard-to-abate sector and see what is possible in terms of similar intervention, applying the knowledge and the experience we will gain from energy transition towards other hard-to-abate sector. So I'll pause here and let the rest take over. Thank you.
I'd now like to welcome Swati D'Souza to discuss the operationalization of JT under ADB TM.
Thanks, Lazina. Hi, good morning, everybody. Welcome to ADB. So the scope of my presentation, I will take you very quickly on what does just transition mean for ADB? How do we define it institutionally? We're still in the process of doing that, but then we're actually applying it within ETM projects, and we will do a quick overview of one of the transactions where we've actually applied it. This is a very quick timeline of the just transition activities within ADB, and this links to the MDB high-level just transition principles. We've not put all the activities that we are doing on JT within the bank. This is a snapshot of how we are linking it to the ETM transaction. So in 2019, so the history of just transition, as we all know, goes back to 1970s and the labor movement in the 1970s. Over 2000, and it started with putting a focus on labor, but this has now become a broader debate. We look at it from a political, from a socio-economic, from a socio-technical, from a cultural perspective. From 2000s and then from 2010s, it has featured prominently within the climate change debate. South Africa is a very shining example in the global south on how just transition has become integrated within the country context and within the climate change debate. In 2019, all the MDBs actually signed a high-level statement. Within that statement, there was one line that said that MDBs will work collaboratively by COP26 in financing and policy strategies and support our DMCs. To create just transition that promotes economic diversification and inclusion. Accordingly, in 2021, we committed to high-level principles, which I will go to in the next slide, which then also links to the launch of ETM in 2021. These are the 5 core principles of the MDB high-level just transition principles. The full document is available online. It's also available on ADB website. I will encourage all of you to go have a look at it if you haven't. ADB adheres to the approach on just transition based on these high-level principles. Guided by these principles, MDBs are engaging with the member countries to do a couple of things. These 4 bullet points over here, which is about mobilizing resources to support countries through dedicated technical assistance and financing, aligning relevant initiatives and programs, mainstreaming JT in ADB's operations, policies, and strategies, and providing knowledge and collaborating with other stakeholders and development partners. This is a snapshot of the different ADB activities on Just Transition. So in 2022, we launched the Just Transition Support Platform. This through which we're working with 7 DMCs. 6 of them actually coincide with the ETM countries as well. In these DMCs, we are providing technical assistance and going at it from a programmatic approach. Along with this, we've also come to, in 2023, in COP last year, we announced the design process for a dedicated finance facility on just transitions. This onion diagram, by now, I'm assuming is familiar to at least some of you, but if it isn't, I'll just very quickly go through this. So the way we look at just transition grows across all the layers. We start at the asset level, as in the ETM transaction, but then everything that we're doing at the asset level links to the district level, to the regional level, and to a national programmatic approach. The process that you see on the right is also part of the broader programmatic approach that we are taking when we talk about just transitions. What we've done within the ETM transaction, while we are focusing at the project level, some of the impacts that need to be tackled have to be tackled at the regional level, at the district level, and at the national level, and we are helping build that linkage across all levels. This is a snapshot of how we envision JT coming in different projects. So the two charts on the left that you see, the first chart is the first option where JT principles sort of guide ETM transactions. The second chart over here is where it guides ETM transactions, but there is a part overlaying where there are some actions that need grant support, and it's not just part of the technical loan document. The broader part is what we are right now building, where we look at JT as an enabler. So when we're thinking about decarbonization and operationalizing our NDCs, it's about integrating just transition as an enabler in operationalizing those NDCs, and how do we then from there go down to sectoral decarbonization. This now, I'm taking you to our pilot transaction in Indonesia, where in Cirebon. This is how we defined the impacts that arose from just transition or are likely to arise from just transition. Direct impact typically looks at employees, contracted, obligated vendors, anyone who has a direct or contractual obligation with the asset owner. The reason why we needed to build these three layers of impact is when we are thinking about it from an actual practical point of view, we need to assign the cost of meeting or managing these impacts to a certain set of entities. And when we are thinking of assigning this cost is where we need to draw boundaries on while we are undergoing transactions. So you have the direct impact, then the indirect impact typically is supply chain. When we're shutting down one plant, we may not see a large supply chain impact, but going forward, as we shut down more coal plants and other fossil fuel assets, there are likely to have broader indirect impacts across both the supply chain as well as the value chain. This is not just linked to the power sector, this is cross-sectoral as well. Induced impacts are impacts that we are thinking in terms of public budgets, in terms of the revenues. Today, a lot of economies are very dependent on fossil fuels. In some economies, oil and gas forms 2 to 3% of their GDP. Coal revenues form a very important part. And this is not just at the national level. We're thinking even local level. We're thinking all the corporate taxes that state-owned enterprises in Global South end up paying their respective governments. All of this has an impact on budgets going forward. It has an impact on how governments will plan their expenditure. A large part of that comes under induced impact. This is a snapshot of the Just Transition analytical framework for Cirebon 1. Here, what we've done is we've looked at internal ADB processes across different guidelines. So we already have established processes on safeguard, we have established processes on gender, and what we've done is we've sort of, instead of starting on a clean new slate, why do we need to reinvent the wheel when there are established processes already there? We sort of brought it all under one umbrella, which is where you see how we've defined the channel of impact, the dimensions of impact. A lot of this comes from ADB's poverty and social analysis policies that we do. This is again, and I believe this is my last slide. This is a very, very quick snapshot of how we envision the Just Transition process in Cirebon 1. So stage 1 is what we've been doing over the last 1-2 years, where we've done pre-feasibility studies, and then we've actually looked at the Just Transition impacts, direct, indirect, and induced. The reason why we had to develop a 4-stage process is because the plant is not going to be shut down today. It's going to be shut down in 2035. So we can identify the exact impacts, but labor market changes, the economic situation changes, there are likely to be technological changes that we will see over the next couple of years, and all of these need to be factored in. But at the same time, when we are undertaking the transaction, we still need to identify who will be the impacted stakeholders within that transaction, which is why we undertook the preliminary just transition process. Again, this is a document that is available on ADB website. If you haven't had a look, please, I encourage all of you to go take a look. And if you have any comments, please send us your comments. We'll be very happy to incorporate those, or at least come back and discuss with you on how do we incorporate those. That then has led to what we want to do over the next 8 years, because now that we've identified stakeholders, we want to sort of do a constant engagement process with them, because obviously communities are worried. First, there was no thermal power plant. Now there's and life went on. Then there was a thermal power plant and they got adjusted to it and life went on. And now we're coming in and going to shut down the thermal power plant. And how do we deal with that? So that is something that we need to work with the communities, and that's the constant engagement that we want to have over the next 11 years. Which then leads us to building an actual plan around 2030, 32, and then looking at the implementation of that plan. I will stop here, but this is typically the next larger proposed programmatic intervention that we want to do, building down from the national level. Remember the onion diagram? So everything that I spoke about is right now Cirebon, but now we want to sort of integrate it within the broader conversation and Indonesia's JETP, which Paul will have a more detailed discussion on. But we want to sort of integrate that with that larger programmatic approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Swati. Can I welcome Paul Butar-Butar, head of Indonesia JETP Secretariat? Thank you.
Yes, good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you for our colleague from ADB for inviting me for this event. I'm sure that all of you have been has known about the JETP, Just Energy Transition Partnership, that was launched during the G20 in Bali in 2022, and at that time there was commitment to support Indonesia energy transitions by let's say, but focusing on the power sector by providing financial support at that time, $20 billion, and then with the target by limiting the emissions in the power sector to 290 million. But when we start working on the project, on the program, actually we find out that it is not easy to reach 290. Then we agree with IPG to reduce the target and also focus the target only on the on-grid power. So at the end, we released the comprehensive investment and policy plan in last year. We launched that last year, limiting the emissions in the on-grid power to 250 million. Then after that, also we discussed with government, and government also strengthened their commitment to decarbonize the energy sector in Indonesia by starting the introduction of the so-called National Energy Transition Task Force, led by Coordinating Minister for Maritime and Investment. And this working group worked with the Minister of Finance, Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources, and also with all related ministries to energy transitions. So under this task force, we have two important, let's say, organizations. So, the first one is Rumah Paten, that's actually joint office that support the energy transition task force to implement. So to implement the energy transitions, and JETP Secretariat that I represent that work on the technical analysis, looking at the financing and so on. So the two organizations actually help to make the energy transition in Indonesia happen, focus now on power sector. So as we discuss more and more with the government, and actually we we had a meeting with the Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources 2 weeks ago, and we find out that there is a need to change the focus. Change the focus means that we see the importance of the energy efficiency and electrifications. This was actually already discussed in the past with the IPG, but at that time, the discussion was focused on the power. But with the new target of the government, we put the energy efficiency and electrification as a first priority. Then come the transmission, and then also the renewable energy, dispatchable as well as variable renewable energy. Then the early retirement, and then the supply chain. And then initially, we put actually early retirement as the second priority for the energy transition in Indonesia. But when, as we go along with the process of development of CIPP, we find out that the only let's say, only one that would be willing to pay for the coal phase out is actually the ADB. The Cirebon and the other projects is actually the only coal phase out that will be retired early as of today. Even in the national electricity plan, there is no plan for another early retirement. So we thank ADB for this, that we go along with the early retirement. That's now becomes the fifth priority. No new coal power plant be retired. But what will we do later on? We have colleagues here from PLN. We call it coal phase down. In the new accelerated renewable energy development by PLN, the plan is actually to reduce the capacity of the coal power plant in order to reduce emissions. So this is the total funding that has been committed for JETP in Indonesia. Initially was 20, then now it becomes 21 billion. There is commercial financing about 10 billion, but the rest is actually will be equity, non-concessional loan, and concessional guarantee, and also a TA and a grant, TA and other means of support. This is the country that committed to support JETP in Indonesia, and we see our colleague from Japan commit to provide almost 15% of the total pledge. And we also thank our colleague from Japan because the operational of the JETP Secretariat actually provided by our colleague from Japan. And then what we have now, since we launched the CIPP, we see actually a lot of going on. 19 ongoing programs using the grants, with the total grants of almost 160 million. 12 new initiative launch with the total funding of 58 million. And there is 7 program undergoing discussion with the total financing of 81 million. Also on the right-hand side, now this is still sorry, this is it's not the updated slide, but the latest number is almost 800 million loan is being discussed. The newest one will be the financing from the DFC for the Ijen geothermal with the total amount of 126 million. And there are 4 ongoing negotiations that with the total loan of 2.1 billion. So as we move along, there are a lot of things happen actually with the JETP. So the financing moving, the project moving. There are list of projects that we have now here, but there are some other, let's say, work that now being organized. For example, there will be a new market sounding for hydro projects in Indonesia. There will be for Sumatra or for Kalimantan and for Sulawesi that will go more than 1 gigawatt. There is a project that is already in the process, ongoing procurement. And we hope that the so-called RUPTL, or the business plan for PLN, would be soon approved, so that we can see all the ongoing projects, or the projects that will be go for the procurement in the next time. So for the JETP Secretariat, this is the work that we are now working on. We start working on the captive power plant, coal power plant. As I mentioned, the CIPP only focuses on the on-grid, but now we want to look at the captive as well, because what is more important for captive power plant in Indonesia, because the number will be increasing, also the capacity will be increasing. Now, the total operating captive power plant is about 12 gigawatt, and it will increase if we don't do something. So the work that we are now looking at is actually try to see what could be done in order to reduce the capacity, or to reduce the energy generated by coal power plant, replacing it maybe with the renewable, or do the energy efficiency in the industry that let's say that use the captive. We start already discuss with several companies that could become our location for the case study, looking at what could be done in this industry. We talk with the nickel smelters, also the nickel plus steel smelters, also with pulp and paper, with the aluminum and so on. So we will look at that during this year. And also we start working on the energy efficiency and electrifications. We established the working group that help us actually identify potential investable projects. So we have a list of projects already, but we need to analyze that. Which one is actually that really need to be need investment? What can be done? What kind of investment could be provided, and so on. And then we will be doing also, we check all the financing or the commitment that has been made by the IPG colleague, also GFANS. So for the purpose of JETP, we are just like debt collectors. So we try to ask them their commitment. So you have to fulfill your commitment by when and how. So this is now the main task of us at the JETP Secretariat. And then we still have to work on the just transition implementation. We will learn a lot from what Swati just presented, because one of them would be actually one of the let's say main content of the just transition implementation plan. Then there will be another things that we are looking at, but one of important things that we are also working on is monitoring on what is going on with the energy transition in Indonesia, including on policy. For example, one of the very important policy that is now being discussed and hopefully could be finalized in the next 1 or 2 months is the local content regulations. This becomes the stumbling block in the investment for the renewable, and there is already progress in that in this regard, and we hope that could be solved within 1 or 2 months. And with that, I will stop here, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, panelists, for your insightful presentations. I'd like to start the conversation with a simple opening question. We all knew that shaking the foundations of present-day industrial economies would be immensely challenging. We've had to anticipate and integrate many different stakeholder concerns in advance and develop the program accordingly. To the panelists, what aspect has been surprisingly smooth or not in our development and implementation in each of these work streams? I'll go to David first.
Sure. Yeah, I think you described it well. It's very very complex. The two things that have been most surprising to me, and they're at opposing sides of the spectrum in a way. One has been the stakeholders that are really willing to look at coal and figure out a way to accelerate the exit from coal. And that can be from the private sector, the financial institutions, governments that have really moved from simple divestment approaches to figuring out how to actually retire these plants early. That is really a sea change, and how quickly that has been a surprise. On the other side, the other thing that has surprised me is the critique from the NGO community. I'm really surprised at this, as we're trying to really wrestle with moving away from the deployment and use of coal. And the critique has been, I think, while helpful in some regards, I think I welcome that debate and discussion. I'm just surprised at the volume of that when I think we're really trying to wrestle with an intractable and complex problem as has been highlighted here.
Thank you, David. I was wondering if I could go to Swati next. Yeah.
Thanks, Lizina. I think two things have both surprised and delighted me, actually. One of it is the interest that we've seen from different stakeholders in engaging with ADB in the ETM process. And here, I think I'm going everything from the workers to the supervisors to the local communities. We've done extensive stakeholder consultation on the ground in Feb and March, and the kind of response that we got, very surprised at it, about how people want to be engaged in the process. The second thing, and that's a very delightful change, because they want to be engaged, but they also want to learn about the process. So there is baseline understanding of how we want to transition, what are our hopes and dreams, how we want to make it just and inclusive. And then there is this whole interest and efforts to be engaged. I still get messages from some of the people whom I met on the ground who actually want to figure out, when are we going to start the work, when they can start engaging with us, how we can build this process over the next couple of years. So I think these two things, very happy to hear about that.
Dion.
Thanks, Tasina. So the biggest surprise for, at least for myself, as we've gone through this initiative to mobilize broadly with the private sector, is how much latent demand there is, right? Initially, we were apprehensive whether is there really a market for what we're trying to do, but there is actually good latent demand within the broad private sector in this initiative. It's just that some have taken a wait and see approach, right? Where everybody wants to do something, doesn't know how to get it started, doesn't have the right framework to get it started, and they're all waiting for perfection. So what we put forward in the market is something of a pathfinding nature, right? How do we build as we go, develop as we go? So we've been, fortunate that we have found partners who are willing to take that early developmental risk of getting this right, in the hope that this crowds in the latent demand that stays with the private sector to work with us in this initiative. Now that also comes with challenges, right? So one of the reason why the private sector has a wait and see is that, as you know, private sector decision making is risk reward, right? I take a risk, I should be rewarded. The higher the risk, I should be rewarded more. Now, unfortunately, in most of the conversation, some of the private sector will look at this purely from a numbers perspective in what they can see in their balance sheet, they can see in their P&L today, right? In this context, some of the reward in taking the risk actually have to be channeled into this energy transition, because we have to do just transition, right? We have to take out productive assets. So that removes some value from a purely numbers perspective in this conversation. So the challenge for us is to be able to articulate what other value this energy transition can bring beyond what they can see today in their balance sheet, in their P&L, right? And then that's been even for us, an educational process. As we have conversation with the private sector, we come to understand deeper what are the concerns that they're facing, both from their shareholders as well as from their targets from a business perspective, and how does the other value add of this energy transition resonate with that, such that we can help them craft the right message as well as how do they enable their activity in this just transition to have value add into their broader business segment. So that's really where the difficulty is, getting that balance with the private sector, where for them to appreciate the risk of the undertaking and that the reward is beyond the immediate number they're going to see from, what is the cost of capital they're going to get from this.
Pat Paul.
Yes. The surprise things when we develop, when we work on JETP is actually that, in fact, the preparation of CIPP and coordination with the government actually is went quite well. So we have a very good collaboration with PLN, with DG Electricity, with DG Renewable, under the coordination of Marvest, the Coordinating Minister for Maritime and Investment. And that's why we have been able to reach the target for let's say, finalizing the CIPP quite on time. That's one of the very important aspect for the success of the launching of the CIPP at that time. So, but more importantly, when we had a lot of discussion with private sectors, they are worried about their markets actually. So especially with their scope 2 emissions that buy electricity from the grid, because with the market pressure, with the global demand for cleaner products, they really like to see that their energy consumptions will be clean. So this is actually becomes become pressure to the government. And when we talk with the Minister of Industry, with Minister of Energy, they really like to move as quick as possible with the energy transitions. You can see that actually how PLN respond to the JETP, and you can see that with the new accelerated renewable energy development in the draft RUPTL. You will see that later on that they really want to be cleaner. And this is the response to the cleaner energy sources.
Thank you, Papal. I'd just like to follow up based on what Dion was saying, in terms of articulating value addition to private sector and how this works for them, even though everyone's not fully compensated for the risk. You just discussed some important drivers for government to pursue this. Can you kind of talk about it with respect to what is the value add for government in pursuing an energy transition like this?
Thank you. So, I mean, Indonesia will rely a lot on the export later on. So, and also it's not only the export, but also the domestic manufacturing, right? So if Indonesia will very much rely still on fossil, then of course they will lose competitions. The private sector will lose competitions. I had one discussion with the CEO of one of the industrial estate in Jababeka, and he said, if we would not change the energy pattern that we have now, then actually the tenant will move out from Indonesia. That shows clear message to the government. So that's the industrial players that look at. And for the Indonesia, what does it mean? It is employment. It is the tax. So this is the income that the revenue of the government that will lose if they really don't do that. So that's why under the leadership of Pak Luhut, for example, he understands this very well. That's why he put pressure a lot on the energy transition. That's why he really established this task force. It's really very important for Indonesia in the future.
I'd just like to quickly tie in a question for Swati before you go to the audience in terms of you mentioned just transition as an opportunity, right, and seeing it. And so tied into the government value add and incentive, how are you sort of promoting and disseminating this message across government counterparties?
So the one thing in Indonesia that we've realized is we didn't need to go and tell the government about the opportunities when it came to just transitions. They were very well aware of it. In fact, in many ways, they were far ahead of us in understanding the opportunities that energy transition and a just and inclusive energy transition can bring them. So that was a plus point that made our lives a lot easier. I think where we can see building on this level of understanding is bringing in cross-sectoral aspects, because when we're thinking energy and we're thinking from a just transition angle, it is the asset and the sector, but it has cross linkages on livelihoods, it has cross linkages on economic diversification as a whole. And that economic diversification doesn't necessarily have to be renewable energy from a local context perspective. It could go beyond renewable energy. And that's where I think we now need to start building in that level of engagement. So energy plus what is the next level of conversation?
And just a last question to Dion before I move on. But in terms of sort of, as both Papal and Swati have shown, kind of, we're laying the groundwork for some pilot transactions now. What do you think are the key challenges now in scaling some of these pilot templates?
Yeah, thanks, Destiny. I think as I mentioned earlier, right now we are in the build as you go stage, right? So that helps us to identify and fine tune further some of the solutions that we proposed. Some of our pilots may not be perfect, right? And scaling up something imperfect is not going to happen with the next transaction, right? So the challenge here is, how do we build on the learning of the pilot, again, working with the private sector to help us augment those areas where they may be better placed to solve some of those questions or to address some of those risks, and then replicate, scale, improve, right? That's really the cycle, the virtuous cycle that we're trying to achieve here. And for us to be able to do that, scale of capital is important, right? So that's why we're trying to grow this beyond ADB's direct intervention. How can we mobilize private sector to put forward some of those risk capital as well, for us to be able to go through that virtuous cycle of improving as we go, rather than just building as we go, right?
We'd just like to turn to the audience in case there are questions here. There's a microphone just in the middle, if you don't mind. Please state your name and organization as necessary. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Tom Dreesen. I know most everybody in this conference. Believe it or not, I'm shocked that I'm here as an energy efficiency representative in this type of a conference, early retirement of coal-fired power plants. And so my question is a bit challenging, but I guess I'm very happy to see, Paul, I've talked about, I'm very happy to see the JETP's recognition of the actual marketplace in Indonesia, that the early retirement in coal-fired power plants is a big challenge, and they've changed it now to focus on energy efficiency and electrification and improving the carbon reduction. But my question is, so there was funding available for the early retirement, and now there's some funding, and Paul and I talked about, for energy efficiency projects to develop. What's the focus? And my understanding is the focus is on scaling up where there's a proven technology. But here's my question. So the global market has always said, we're not doing coal. We're not financing coal. We're not providing any funding for coal at all. So my question is, what type of funding is going to be provided for energy efficiency projects in the JETP in Indonesia? What type is that? Because it seems to me that could be conflicting with the overall knowledge, and everybody's saying we don't do coal. So is there going to be debt funding, or are they going to provide, what type of funding support is going to be provided for energy efficiency projects in Indonesia? See my question? It's like, it's always said we're not going to do it, but now I'm saying that JETP says they are going to provide some funding for development, or maybe not funding. That's what I'm trying to find out. What type of funding is going to be provided for the energy efficiency improvement in the JETP program in Indonesia?
I'll pass to Paul in the more specific, but just from a general perspective, Tom, knowing that some of the work you do, I think, is valuable by making coal plants more efficient. That actually saves carbon emissions. The general trend that I see is that financial institutions are going to be very hesitant to provide any funding especially to a coal plant that will extend its life. Because, you know, by making it more efficient, by making it operate well, you're in a way going to extend its life. Where we have seen some change is the financial institutions, where previously they just said anything with the word coal in it, no, will actually support early retirement of coal. So that's a change. And then I think when it comes to energy efficiency, as long as it has nothing to do with a fossil fuel powered plant, I think they will fund that, just speaking from a very macro perspective. But again, I think this does start to really, you know, demonstrate some of the complexity that, you know, if we could actually make coal plants more efficient, that would have a reduction in emissions. Yes, like I think from a very technical point of view, that I absolutely agree with that. Working within our practical envelopes of funds that we have, we will not be able to support anything that reduces emissions, whether those are carbon or other pollutants from a coal plant. We can't do that.
Can we discuss that in private later on? Just kidding. Okay, as the working group on the energy efficiency and electrification just established, actually, you come quite early with the questions, but this is one of the issue actually that we will touch in the working group, because we really want to see what kind of financing that we could mobilize for. Let's say, for the energy efficiency measures, not only in the industry, but also for transportation. So we had a discussion early with the Minister of Finance. In the past, back in 2013, 2015, when I was working as an advisor to Minister of Finance, we worked actually on preparation for the revolving fund. When I talked recently with the Minister of Finance, then they said we really need to look at the revolving fund again, that we could invest in energy efficiency. How it will end up later on, this will be the work that will be done by the working group together with financial working group of the JETP. So at the good time, we will let you know what would be the financing possibility. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Okay. Yes, can you hear me? Hello? Yeah, Pierre Horna from ESCAP Secretariat in Bangkok. First of all, nice to see you, Paul, and the colleagues from ADB. Also, I'm going to speak to this afternoon on a very similar topic. So I want just to follow up on two things. First, decommissioning early coal plants in Indonesia, since we're talking about Indonesia today. We can also talk about Vietnam or here, Philippines. But the problem, I would say, connecting to the gentleman just spoken, is about the problem of how to, the majority of the Indonesians' coal plants are younger plants, and they are already somehow efficient. They are not carbon capturing though, but they're still efficient. And the point is, there has been some strategies to reduce the livelihood of these current plants with renewing, with enterprise value, so reinventing the first value. So enterprise value efficiency will be more incorporated in the strategy. However, if we go a little bit on the multidisciplinary approach of this problem, we are not looking at also coal mines, because this is connected to this area. How it's connected? Because we have been looking at this trajectory of how this decommissioning or strategic interventions of coal mines are included, but there's no comprehensive, to my knowledge at least, of how to also address the problem of coal mining production, because that will also be impacting, you know. And we're talking about subsidies today. We're talking about how to organize and to address this problem. So my comment and question perhaps on this stand is there any holistic view on this issue? Not only about decommissioning coal plants in itself, but to have an overall approach on Indonesia is one of the most important coal producers in the world. how can we address this problem as well? Because otherwise it will be somebody else's problem, not Indonesia, but somebody else. I don't want to say which countries, but you know, this is the big issue also to take into account the multidimensional approach that this session is all about. So I just want to hear from ADB what is his approach on this problem.
Sure, I think we'll probably go David, Swati, and Papal, and Dion, please chime in at the end if you can.
I guess the way I look at it is from a fuel perspective, and if we were to start in the opposite direction, which would be to work on closing mines versus the end use of the coal, then if we closed all the mines in Indonesia, then Australia, South Africa, and Canada would simply produce more. So in that respect, by actually supporting the retirement of coal plants, we're actually reducing that demand. And as long as those plants are either repurposed with other low carbon technology or replaced with renewables, then we are actually eliminating emissions and reducing the need for that coal. And when you look at the global coal reserves, we're talking hundreds of years. So by starting with, eliminating certain end uses, I think that's the right place to start. And then I'm guessing Swati will talk about, the regional impacts of that. And that's where I think that is going to be a really important consideration.
Thanks, David. So your question is very interesting because everything that we've spoken right now is at an asset level, and we've not actually covered a holistic national programmatic approach when we're thinking of retirement of coal plants and the coal mines, which is what we're actually trying to do. So when I mentioned about operationalizing NDCs, so Indonesia's NDCs, when we think about operationalizing that, is when we start looking at not just the coal closure and early retirement and repurposing of thermal power plants, but also the supply chain, which is where the mines come into play. Now, a lot of this is actually not happening in this decade. A lot of this is actually happening in the next decade, which is why we're working with the government of Indonesia to first understand what are going to be your macroeconomic impacts. And this is across the broader national economy. We filter that down to what your regional impacts are going to be, because yes, there are 2 or 3 regions that are coal dependent, but let's not forget there are industries that are reliant on this coal consumption. So it is not just the thermal power plant sector, but all the other industries that are reliant, which will also have an impact when we think about closing these thermal power plants. So which is why we need to think about it from a regional impact and then boil that down to local and district level impacts. This multi-layered approach requires a lot of coordination and a lot of, I don't want to say convincing of stakeholders, but little bit providing incentives. What Dion mentioned, why should the private sector be interested in thinking about, the people side of the dimension, right? How can we incentivize every stakeholder to believe that this is a good idea going forward, apart from the fact that, there are heat waves in large parts of the world and everybody is reading about it in papers. But what is the real material incentive? And a large part of the approach that we are doing over the next couple of years is about building this narrative going forward. Very happy to talk about this in greater detail after this conference. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. That's really interesting question, and really need to think about it. From the JETP perspective, we will not discuss this issue because we will be focusing on the power sector so far. But in some of our discussion with CSO, we come up with this issue, and the discussion was, would there be any other options to use coal without burning? Because burning the coal is actually our issue. And this is the thing that we are now also discuss with CEO, whether they could find a way of let's say, utilizing the coal without burning. So there was some discussion with the scientific with the academics on this as well, with close close circle of let's say academics that would really like to find how do you call it, the rare material and so on. So I think the issue is not so become a priority for now for Indonesia, but it will come, as Swati said, it will come in decades. And I think with the energy transition that now coming on in Indonesia, we will have sufficient time to really find a way to address this issue later on. Thank you.
Time for one more question, sorry.
Yes, hi. My name is Anand Chikatur from Deloitte and USAID, Vietnam Low Emissions Energy Program. My question is about tighter environmental standards, emission standards for coal plants. As you know, one of the ways in which coal retirements has happened in US and Europe is to have much stricter environmental standards. And then you could do asset by asset evaluation of whether those plants can retrofit to meet those performance standards or actually retire early. So I want to ask about the role that ADB sees in promoting stricter emission standards for coal plants as part of your maybe mechanisms to retire coal early.
I'll make a first comment, and I think Lizina actually knows the answer to this better than I do. But in terms of standards, I would start off by saying with two words: enforcement and alternatives. And so you can set all the standards you want, but if they're not enforced, then they don't have any benefit. So I think that's often, we see that in many of our countries where that's an issue. And then the other aspect is alternatives. So we need to make sure that we build up the solutions so that coal plants aren't necessary from a cost and a technical perspective. And one of the things we haven't highlighted, but one of our speakers in the next session is from Kazakhstan. As we look into Kazakhstan, why do they use coal? Because it provides heat. Without heat, people die. It's really that simple. So if we really want to push the transition from coal to other technologies, we need to make sure that alternative exists in a cost-effective and technically viable way. So those are the 2 points I would make, but then I want to pass to Lizina.
Just a positive point, which is that has sort of been trialed in Indonesia. It is starting up now with the emissions trading system, whereby about 100 CFPPs have been piloted in the last year with meeting a specific emission standard, whereby they would be taxed above, and and that standard would then change year on year, hopefully with a downward trajectory. And that is something that ADB is working with the Ministry of Energy on to kind of, and to David's point, sort of support it in a manner that is enforceable and that is commensurate with the alternatives available. And I think this discussion is actually interesting in terms of, we also brought up energy efficiency. Can we finance the energy efficiency of CFPPs, et cetera? I think ETM is a very interesting, challenging initial tool to accelerate the energy transition. And I think everything that we're saying up here on the panel is showing you that it's a work in progress. And what often we use internally is that we're building the plane as we fly it. And that is, a very big change for ADB to kind of be, to put our foot forward, despite the risks and despite the imperfection that might result, because we think that the knowledge and the lessons learned gleaned from the experience will be valuable to the entire community that is charging forth on climate. So to Tom's question on energy efficiency for coal, there is a CIF decarbonization for industry facility that is being started up, and that you know, as Paul referenced, there's captive coal is a big issue in Indonesia for heavy industry. But is there opportunity to, you know, promote energy efficiency for non-heavy industry, for, you know, et cetera? So really taking our wins where we can find it to provide a holistic solution is something that we will work towards, and ETM is part of that solution. And anything we learn from, you know, the retirement of developing this tool can also be applied to developing new tools for other problems. So we look forward to applying that methodology. Thank you very much, everybody, for your interest. Yeah? Oh, sorry. Yes, please. One more. Sure. Yeah.
Thank you so much. My name is Zulpat, Kazakhstan Central Asia Climate Foundation Project Office. So, Paul, I would say that the example of just transition in Indonesia is really inspiring, and we are fully supporting you in all your endeavors, and we know how much you work on it. We just recently met with your colleagues in Kazakhstan. So I have one question. I think that everybody knows that coal producers and coal miners, they get a huge support. So in order to work smartly, intelligently, and politically right, you need to have some mandate to perform all these programs and strategies in your country, because it is really interconnected with the many like cross-sectoral activities. So can you please share with us what is the mandate and how it was developed? What was the decision made? And maybe you can share with us what was the political will, or what was the turning point, how you got the support and you started this program in Indonesia. Thank you.
Sorry, you mean on the JETP, mandate for JETP?
JETP, yes, please.
Okay. Uh, as I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, it was actually a joint statement between government of Indonesia, then International Partner Group and GFANS, IPG and GFANS, that was announced during the G20 in Bali. So that announcement was as a base used as a basis for the work for the JETP Secretariat, for the work of JETP. Since then, actually, the Secretariat was established, and we worked together with all parties, including our colleague here, ADB, that led the financing working group. We have the International Energy Agency that led the technical working group, also the UNDP work on the just transitions, and also World Bank that work on the policy. So we work based on this joint statement. But in addition to that, government has established a presidential regulation back in 2022 that mandated that there will be no new on-grid coal power plant to be built. Of course, although there is still be allowed to build captive coal power plant, that would add value to the resources that we have in Indonesia. The problem is this coal, the captive, because there are so many resources in the area that there is no grid. So because of this situation, so they have to use coal power plant actually to process the mineral. So as I mentioned in the presentation, what we are doing now is trying to let's say see how they could decarbonize their power plants. As part of the presidential regulation that I mentioned, actually it is said that 10 years after the operation, they have to reduce the GHG emissions by 35%, and by 2050, they have to stop the operation of a coal power plant. That's actually the legal basis that we use for the commissioning of coal power plant later on. In that presidential regulation, there is mandated to develop a kind of roadmap for the the commissioning, and this roadmap is still work in progress. We hope that it can be issued as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Zulfa. We look forward to hearing from you again in the next session. With that, I think we'll take a short break and look forward to seeing you all for panel number 2. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here this morning again. For those of you joining us for panel 2 for the first time, just a recap. ADB's Energy Transition Mechanism, or ATM program, is the topic of discussion today. It is a program active in 7 countries across the Asia and the Pacific. The program aims to accelerate the retirement or repurposing of fossil fuel power plants using public and private finance, and scale up investment in clean energy and energy storage, and support a just and affordable energy transition, addressing the impacts of coal retirement on people and communities. ETM's goal is to transform the energy sector in our region, and once scaled up, it has the potential to serve as the largest carbon reduction model in the world. So thank you again for joining us for panel number 2. For this panel, we will be talking to some of our key government champions who are placing a very brave foot forward to shake up their energy sectors. I'll pause here just briefly as some people walk in. I will be asking the panelists to come up. Please come up as I call your name. So first we have Mr. Joshua Partogi, Environment and Social Safeguard Team Leader for PT SMI, Sarana Multi-Infrastructure, the Indonesia's National Infrastructure Bank and manager of the Indonesia ETM Country Platform. Joshua is an environmental and social team leader at PTSMI. His main responsibilities include coordinating environmental and social due diligence and monitoring projects, developing ESG guidelines, as well as supporting PTSMI's role as the country platform. Next, we have Ms. Glenda Karingal, Department Manager, Power Sector Assets and Liabilities Management Corporation in the Philippines. Glenda is the manager of PSOM IPP and PPA contracts Administration Department. PSOM is a government-owned and controlled corporation which took ownership of all existing generation assets, liabilities, IPP contracts, real estate, and all other disposable assets of the National Power Corporation in the Philippines, with the objective of liquidating all of NPC financial obligations in an optimal manner. Glenda is a lawyer by profession with more than 20 years of experience in government service. Next is Vichet Keo, Deputy Director, Department of Energy Development, General Department of Energy, Ministry of Mines and Energy for the Government of Cambodia. Vichet is a physics graduate with a research interest in PV module technologies and nuclear physics. He's been working in Cambodia's power sector for more than 7 years. His work mainly involved accelerating and modernizing rural electrification, investment in energy infrastructure, accelerating the energy transition, energy statistics, and balance table preparation. He facilitated the development of numerous national power policies and plans and is an active participant in discussions on the ASEAN power grid and the development of the ASEAN energy outlook. Last but certainly not least, we have Zulpat Azieva, advisor to the CEO, Project Office for Central Asia on Climate Change and Green Energy, Kazakhstan. Zulpat brings a rich background in oil and gas and international maritime transport to her role as the advisor to the CEO. Zulpat is committed to accelerating the climate transition in Central Asia through strategic policy support, innovation, and partnership. Thank you, panelists, for journeying here to join us today. I'd like to welcome Pat Joshua to make his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Lezina. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joseph Partogi, as mentioned earlier, from PTSMI. I'm here on behalf of our CEO, Pa Edwin, who unfortunately cannot be here today with us because of other engagements. So I'm just going to start my presentation with a short introduction of who PTSMI is. PTSMI is a financial institution wholly owned by the Indonesian Ministry of Finance. We have 3 business pillars, which are commercial financing, public financing, and advisory and project development. We have both conventional and Sharia source of funds, which we use to support projects in several sectoral focus, which include road, toll road, power plant projects, including, of course, renewable energy projects, and also social infrastructures such as hospitals, schools, and markets, and tourism projects as well. So on top of these activities, of course, we are also mandated to be the Indonesian ETM country platform manager. This is one of many initiatives by the Indonesian government, of course, to partake in the global effort to mitigate the impacts of climate change, as evident in our national NDC, which is to reduce our emissions by as much as 30% unconditionally and by as much as 40% conditionally. And of course, by reaching net zero emissions by 2060. So a big part of this effort to reach the NZ by 2060 is, of course, as already mentioned in the previous session, is transitioning the energy sector. And a big part of it, of course, in the power sector. So I think this is already clearly described by Paul earlier. I mean, I got this figure from JETP that in order to meet the energy transition target of Indonesia, it's going to take a total capital expenditure of around somewhere between 50 to 130 billion US dollars. And with the potential funding from JETP amounts to around 20 billion, that means there's a funding gap of around 30 to 110 billion US dollars. And that's a huge gap that needs to be met. To the right is just to describe some of the activities that we already do in PTSMI to support the energy transition, especially in the power sector through our support on renewable energy projects. I think currently we have between 35 to 40 renewable energy projects in our portfolio, which is not a lot, but I think we have doubled, if not tripled, our RE portfolio in the last 5 years or so. So just goes to show that we are very committed to participating and contributing to the energy transition of Indonesia. So, of course, on top of earlier we discussed about the transitioning is expensive. It also, as Swati already mentioned, has impacts, both positive and negative. I got this from the JETP CIPP, which states that in order to have a just transition, we have to cover some of the potential impacts that comes with transition, especially when you are talking about retiring coal-fired power plant, for example. So they've developed some framework standards which covers environmental, social, and economic aspects. I think the whole idea is to have a comprehensive assessment, baseline assessment, in order to be able to build a risk mitigation action plans that are reliable and comprehensive, and also at the same time, of course, engaging the relevant stakeholders, because Swati already mentioned engagement with stakeholders is very important, especially when talking about impacts impacts on a lot of people, not only the project, but also the community surrounding the project that has benefited for all these years from the operation of the project. This figure it was already described by Swati of what the ADB has been doing in the all throughout last year and early into the first quarter of this year to do the initial assessment to develop the just transition action plan for our pilot coal-fired power plant early retirement in Java, in Cirebon. And this, as I already mentioned, is going to go through the development will go to 2032 and 2033 onwards, where they will be implemented. And of course, also an important part of it is the monitoring and evaluation of how these mitigation action plans are implemented and what are the impacts on the community, for example. Just to give an illustration, the figure to the right is some potential impacts that I think I got this from studies conducted by 2 Indonesian CSOs who are focusing on the impact of just transition, especially the coal phase out or early retirement of coal-fired power plants. These numbers they use the assumption of early retiring not 1 but 3 coal-fired power plants in Java. I think with the capacity of close to about 2,500 megawatts. And the impacts are quite significant, like the reduction in GDP, for example, the impact on the direct and indirect workers, around 14,000 workers will be impacted. And there'll be more than 3,000 people in communities surrounding the power plants that will fall below the poverty line. And of course, business owners who are, as I said earlier, benefiting from the operation of the power plant will also lose some of the profit. So these are just to give an illustration of how big the impact is going to be, potentially. Of course, what the ADB is going to do on the left slide here is going to come up with a better, more detailed baseline and risk and assessment and analysis. But the figures to the right is just to give you a description of how big the impacts are and how really serious we have to take this just transition framework and implementation. So what do PTSMI do with regard to those impacts? I mean, of course, on top of us supporting transition asset classes like coal phasing out, which we are going in the process of doing, adding renewable energy projects in Indonesia, for example, through the provisions of blended finance. We are also developing frameworks that we can use to mitigate some of the impacts that I've said earlier. So we already have developed a socio-economic framework with the help of one of our partners, and we are also in the process of developing the just transition framework together with ADB. So this framework, I think we think is going to be very important because we need to have a comprehensive and consistent approach in, for example, to do the baseline assessment, who we have to talk to, the stakeholders that we need to engage, especially not only at the project level, of course, but also the subnational government and the central government, because as already mentioned, some of the mitigation actions will not be implemented by the project owners themselves. It's because some of the impacts, some of the induced impacts, probably going to happen 100 kilometers away from the project site. So a good engagement with stakeholders, including, of course, the CSOs, which I think some of the concerns and criticisms by the CSO is that the transition, the whole initiative of energy transition is not yet participatory enough, especially when it was the people are going to be directly impacted by these decisions being taken at national level. So having this just transition framework is going to help us to mitigate some of these issues and address some of the concerns of the CSOs. I think this my last slide is just an example of how we use blended finance to support energy transition. In particular, in this case, is the geothermal exploration projects. We, together with the World Bank, GF, and CTF, developed a geothermal resource risk mitigation scheme in which we provide a loan facility with de-risking for state-owned enterprise drilling, because one of the issues, of course, with geothermal exploration is the high risk. We have a lot of potentials. We have a lot of geothermal resources in Indonesia, but we don't have a lot of geothermal projects. So this is one way we support the scaling up of geothermal power in Indonesia, and hopefully with this, at least from the geothermal projects, we can increase some of the numbers of operating power plants. And I think I'll end there. So back to you, Regina. Thank you.
Thank you, Pa Joshua. I'd now like to welcome Glenda on stage to discuss PSOM and its recent endeavors.
Good morning. I am here to present the Philippine experience on the coal to clean transition in a market-driven energy sector. Shown here are just 4 of the 11 policy declarations of Republic Act number 9136, or the Philippines Electric Power Industry Reform Act of 2001. I picked these 4 policy declarations here because they manifest the vision at the time to transform the Philippine energy sector into a privatized market. The Philippines committed to ensure transparent and reasonable prices of electricity in a regime of free and fair competition and full public disclosure and accountability. It also committed to ensure fair and non-discriminatory treatment of public and private sector entities in the process of restructuring the electric power industry. The Philippines also sought to enhance the inflow of private capital and to broaden the ownership base of the power generation, transmission, and distribution sectors. And one of the ways to do that was to provide for an orderly and transparent privatization of assets and liabilities of the National Power Corporation, or NPC. And that's where we come in, the Power Sector Assets and Liabilities Management Corporation, or PSAM. Prior to the enactment of the EPIRA, all power assets and liabilities of the government were lodged with the NPC. By virtue of the EPIRA, the Small Power Utilities Group, or SPUG, remained with NPC, while the transmission assets were transferred to the National Transmission Corporation, or TRANSCO. All other liabilities and assets were transferred to PSAM. The EPIRA created PSAM to take ownership of all existing generation assets, liabilities, independent power producer contracts, real estate, and all other disposable assets of NPC, including TRANSCO. PSAM was also tasked to manage the orderly sale, disposition, and privatization of these assets with the objective of liquidating all NPC financial obligations and stranded contract costs in an optimal manner. PSAM also acts as administrator of the Universal Charge Fund to be dispersed to beneficiaries only for the purposes provided under the EPIRA. Until a new law extending the corporate life of PSAM is enacted, PSAM will wind up in June 2026. PSAM is a government-owned and controlled corporation. As such, PSAM is bound by government policy directives as it performs its mandate of privatizing power assets. One of the most important of these policy directives is the transition to renewable energy, or RE. This slide shows only a few of the recent clean energy initiatives of the Philippine government. The target is to achieve at least 35% RE share in the power generation mix by 2030 and 50% by 2040. In 2018, Congress enacted the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, which promotes the efficient use of energy and grants incentives to energy efficiency and conservation projects. Just last year, the President issued Executive Order Number 21, establishing the policy and administrative framework for offshore wind development. In November 2022, the amendment to the implementing rules and regulations of the Renewable Energy Act paved the way for accelerated RE deployment by allowing full foreign ownership in renewable energy sector. RE resources also enjoy preferential dispatch in the wholesale electricity spot market. And in December 2020, the Department of Energy issued the advisory on the moratorium of endorsements for greenfield coal-fired power projects. This is in support of the agenda to undergo an energy transition to a low-carbon future through RE development and utilization. In August last year, PISAM commenced the privatization activities for our only remaining coal IPP contract through the Energy Transition Mechanism privatization structure. Under the IPP contract, the private entity would own and operate the coal plant, while the government would purchase the plant's electricity output over a cooperation period of 25 years. At the end of the cooperation period, the ownership of the power plant would be transferred to the government. The agreement also provides for a buyout option in which the government may purchase all of the private entity's interest in the coal plant ahead of the expiration of the cooperation period. The ETM privatization structure would involve the early retirement of the coal plant after the buyout and subsequent repurposing or replacement with clean energy. The ADB is assisting the government in this project. Based on our current timeline, we hope to commence early retirement of the coal plant in 2026. We are still very early in the process, and as I mentioned, the decision to commence the ETM privatization structure was made only in August 2023. But so far, these are the issues and challenges that we have encountered. The moving timeline is brought about by the fact that we have just started the process, but it has understandably become very confusing for coal plant stakeholders. We are working to at least provide some certainty as we progress in the process. It is also a challenge to observe government procurement regulations with its strict prescribed periods. Obviously, this has an effect on the movement of the timeline because we identify items that need to be procured as we go along. But we recognize that it is a very important matter and very worthwhile. That is my last slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Glenda. I'd now like to welcome Vichet to present on Cambodia's ETM. Thank you.
Okay. Very good morning. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Vichet from Department of Energy Development, General Department of Energy, Ministry of Mines and Energy, Cambodia. Today it's my pleasure to be here and to be invited by ADB team to just briefly present about Cambodia energy transition progress, which will be mainly based on the latest update like the PDP and also the current implementations under the energy transition mechanisms supported by ADB. So let's first start. I'll take you to just see the overview of our power mix just last year, which is we have less than like 5 gigawatt and mostly is domestic resource. Most of the resources come from the renewable energy. The major source is hydropower, followed by solar PV, a small portion of biomass. And the rest around like 14 or 50%, 15% we import from neighboring country. If you know, we have 3 neighboring countries, which are Laos, PDR, Thailand, and Vietnam. And based on the recent or the latest PDP, and also I think maybe like most of you that attended yesterday opening of the conference. Our minister also announced this target, especially in terms of the ambitious targets of OE integration in 2030 and 2040. So you will see in Cambodia we have a very short potentials of domestic oil resource. That's why we see this opportunity and we plan to increase oil up to at least 70% by 2030. And based on even the recent analysis, until 2040, we have even almost 80% of oil. And you will notice that until 2030, mostly like oil like generation will be from hydropower, but after that it will be mostly from solar power, which is very big. And so that it is very crucial to have the battery energy storage system installed, and also along with the grid stability enhancement and also the modernization as well. And for such ambitious target, we need a very big investment. And from just only from 2024 until 2030, we will need at least 1 billion USD, which is quite big for the case of Cambodia, because we are a small we are a small country, and so $1 billion US is quite big for us. Our energy policy mainly based on the CARE principle, which is clean, affordable, reliable, and also equitable. Just like I mentioned before that we aim to increase more OE into the power system, and at the same time we also try to save energy up to 19% by 2030 based on the latest adopted national energy efficiency policy. Last but not least, at this point, it is also referring to the integration of EV, which is quite new to Cambodia, but like we are working very hard on like developing the roadmap for the EV deployment. For the affordability, of course, I think maybe like some of you probably realize that the tariff in Cambodia, it is like a little bit higher compared to neighboring countries, but it makes sense because like our power system is small, it's not that big. However, despite the change of fluctuations of the price of the fossil fuel recently, but the government still keep the same tariff and even try to see the feasibility to reduce a tariff until 2028, because we understand that it is very crucial for all the consumer, especially for the investor. And at the same time, in order to attract more investment, especially in the recent pentagonal strategies of the government, we also plan to try to enhance the reliability of the system by looking more on the resource diversification, and at the same time try to reduce the side effects of the power system, especially focus on the special economic zone, which will be attracting more investors to the country. Last but not least, we do not forget about the word like transition, but just only transition. And at the same time, we also looking at how to encourage the participant from the women into power sector, especially energy transition. And we hope to have at least 60% of women in the operation and in the utility scale like solar power in the future. And the next point, which is the points of today's session about the energy transition mechanisms. Today, my presentation it's not really, like a sharing of experience, but showing here just only showing the current status, and I'm looking forward to learn more from our college, from like other countries that they are doing like good enough right now for the energy transition mechanism. Because right now we have just signed the MOU with ADB regarding the energy transition mechanism, just like the second quarter of 2024. So there's still a lot of work to do, and we understand the benefit, and everyone knows, especially it is like covered by a previous speaker also. What we will see is that by using the ETM blended structure, we will see that we will like win, not just only like you know, the government side, a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders, especially like the owners of the project, and also like the financing institution, they also win at the same time. And it is really aligned with our existing policy, which aim to increase more OE into the power system. So a lot of investment, both for the generation and transmission, is needed. That's why the funding through this ATM, it is very crucial. It's come you know, at a very right time for Cambodia. And last but not least, about the just energy transition, I also mentioned in previous slide that we really consider, you know, the impact of these implementation to existing like models of the power business in Cambodia. So this is also college from ADB also mentioned. So far it is the same, especially in the single bio market, just like Cambodia. Currently we have the Arctica, which is the state-owned company, Electricity de Cambodia, or ADC, will pay, you know, like the payment under like certain years, I mean certain year under the PPA to the project like company. And of course, it is like the same for all IEP model in Cambodia, but we expect that after the implementation of ETM, it will shorten, you know, the periods of the PPA, so that it will be a win-win. I mean, at this point, we plan to, you know, we expect probably at least like 5 years of, I mean, shorten the PPA at least like 5 years to 8 years. It depends. In case the carbon market or carbon credits becomes available in Cambodia, so we can see like more opportunity from that transaction, and we can shorten up to 8 years of the current PPA. And at this point, of course, ADC, the state-owned company, will be also the winner, because they can like shorten, I mean, the times of application for the capacity payment. And for the investor, for the IPP, they can get like the whole returns of investment within a shorter periods of time. And what I mentioned that we just like signed the MOU, so like I'm proud to show, even though we don't have like, you know, any information right now, but this is what we are working with ADB and the ATM. So we plan to see the feasibility of early retirement of one like units of coal power plant, which is Cambodia Energy Limited, CEL1, around 100 megawatt. And right now we're still working on you know, the discussion to analyze on, to see the impacts on this transaction on the power system stability, and also the financial structure or change, and also to see the impacts of this transaction on the tariff as well, because ensuring the tariff, it is very, you know, the priorities of the current government right now. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vichet. Please let me turn to Zilpa to present on Kazakhstan ATM. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Is it afternoon? Almost. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, supporting the community of those who are actually facing the issues of the climate change and ready to do something with that. And thank you so much, ADB, for this event and giving a chance for us to share our plans, our experience, and etc. So my name is Zulpat, so I'm representing the Central Asia Climate Foundation Project Office, recently established by the leader of our country, the President of Kazakhstan. So the main mission and among others in terms of climate change agenda, the main mission of our project office and organization is to ensure a gradual, sustainable and social responsible transition away from the use of the coal. So this is why it was a Kazakhstan's initiative to open the project office there in Kazakhstan, and that is why we are here today. So also our president, he suggested and proposed implementing in our region the first JETP platform with the support with the ADB Bank. Let's start from the main document in Kazakhstan about the climate change, the strategy for the carbon neutrality by 2060, where we have a just transition and job creation as a part of the strategy, among other activities which we are planning to do. So if you look at our energy emissions and if you want to understand the scale, we would say that our commitments starts from 1990s, where we started estimating how much emissions we can calculate. So when we have the commitments, we want to say that by 2060 we want to get to the net zero, but we are planning to reduce by 2030 by 15%. You can see here that the main share of emissions comes from the energy market and energy activities. And in energy activities, the emissions coming from fuel combustion. And now I will say that decarbonization of energy sector will help us in energy transition process and achieving NDC goals, which we are actually submitting in the end of this year, because every 5 years we renew our NDC, how to say, commitments, but they are supposed to be better and better, more ambitious next year. So by 2060, we are going to achieve our carbon emission neutrality by the capture and absorption. So when we talk about the strategy, we have two main documents in Kazakhstan. The strategy 2050, which means the national development of Kazakhstan, and we have a strategy of achieving carbon neutrality on the Republic of Kazakhstan. And all subordinate documents in the state will be issued only with aligning and reflecting provisions of this strategy. When we talk about the decarbonization in our strategy, we have 6 main areas like energy, industrial manufacturing processes, agriculture, buildings, and transport and waste management. Here we are going to talk a little bit more about the energy market. So energy market is mainly composed by 3 stages. It's a decarbonization of primary energy supply, reducing leakage during the extraction and improving efficiently of mineral extraction itself, together with the international organizations which we are partnering with at the moment. Also, decarbonization of electricity and heat production, and decarbonization of and highly efficient energy and use. So here we say that we need to encourage household and small medium-sized enterprises to install renewable energy stations and simplify system of issuing and purchasing offset carbon units from implementation, which is also in pipeline of foundation. I want also highlight that in order to deliver the strategy and achieve strategic goals, our country is developing the roadmap, and our foundation, together with the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources and with Minister National Economy, will be involved in developing the roadmap, how we will achieve. So if you see on the scale, every 5 years, we will review and adjust accordingly. So we, at the moment, we are working on conceptualizing how we want to achieve and implement energy transition and JETP. For that, we are looking at the evaluation and strategy development, where we will evaluate every single factor which could contribute to the success or not success of the project. We will develop a case-specific adaptation. Here we talk about people. All the previous speakers mentioned that we have a supply chain issues, we have educational, and etc. Everything which is involved in transition process will be going through the adaptation projects. Then we will look for the pilot mines project, pre-feasibility and feasibility analysis for the selected mines. And the rest is going to be classic project execution process in general. So I want to say that at the moment, ADB already prepared the pre-feasibility study, how it could be, might be pre-feasibility high-level study, how it might be, and we are forecasting that there will be the full feasibility study. So if you want to see the power system of Kazakhstan, all these black parts of the bars are showing that electricity generation is mainly coming from the coal-fired thermal power plants. But when we say why we need just energy transition and why we cannot trade off with those who resist just energy transition, we want to say that we cannot sacrifice life and health of the citizens of the country when we really understand that in any country in general, when you pollute like this, and our country is not the most polluted in general, however, according to the research of Dr. Nasima Baymatova, we can say that it is negatively impacting health of children. There is a miscarriage, there are cancer, and other sicknesses and diseases. And this is why JETP is more a mission of citizens of Kazakhstan and Central Asia, how we need to support our children, and especially considering that the gender equality, and you may have a heat at home, you may have a light at home, you may have a water at home, but when your wife is miscarrying your child, you don't need it. So it's all about future health of the population of Kazakhstan. If someone disagrees, we don't say that they're bad. We just say like, let's learn. Let's learn from Indonesia. Let's learn from Philippines. There are examples how we can do it. If you don't know technology, we will learn it. That is why a main part of the foundation work is merging knowledge management with innovation management and bringing knowledge together, engaging those who are going to be exposed to the changes. It's going to be just and fair transition, which is not going to happen in a couple of years. We will make sure that people who earn money on those fields and mines will not lose their income, but they will never lose their husbands and fathers on coal mines anymore. Statistically, there is one mortality case for 1 million coal mine. Annually, Kazakhstan mines 70 million tons of coal. This is why the JETP was initiated by the leader of Kazakhstan to make sure that we will have a prosperity and healthy people in our country in the future. Of course, we have challenges. We have technical challenges. We have market conditions, and we have a policy regulation. However, our foundation project office was established to make sure that we will be a bridge between the organizations and population and business and government to tackle all these problems. I already said why we need the ETM, but it's also access to the concessional finance, because in the future, all this coal mining and all those coal burner and etc., they will face issues with the trading their products on international market. That is why they already started working on seeking for finances for the renewables, but we need to make it holistic, system-based to achieve strategic goals. Of course, we know that we have a problem how we want to replace this system, and we suggest that the potential coal-fired power plants will be replaced by the renewable energy to produce exact amount of energy needed for the heat and electricity and etc., so that at the moment we estimate that the capital we require is going to be something about $75 billion. So we also want to highlight that in 2026 we are going to hold the regional climate summit in Kazakhstan. By that we hope to develop a JEP concept with engaging all bodies and collaborate with the best examples representing here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Zilpat. So this has been very interesting. I think the extent of national ambition that is presented on this stage is inspiring, and it's actually very galvanizing in terms of ADB's. I think there is strong interest in proceeding across the board. I'd start with one question. Essentially, we've highlighted how multifaceted ETM is as an endeavor. Can I ask each of you sort of what degree of internal government coordination, which within ministries, departments, and sort of how has that played a role in formalizing this commitment to ETM? Have you encountered any unexpected allies within government in your journey, given the multifaceted nature of ETM? I think Zolpat had mentioned that there are sort of almost visceral, sort of health arguments as to why you should do this. There are also sort of trade arguments as to why you should do this. Which resonated most internally within your governments, and sort of who were you able to bring on board that you didn't expect? I guess I'll start with Pa Joshua, if you don't mind.
So I think for this question, Lizina, you know better than me, I suppose. Yeah, but from what I see from the coordinations and meetings that I attend, I think we have two important ministries in Indonesia that are taking lead in this: the Maritime and Investment Coordinating and the Ministry of Finance. So through these two institutions, I mean, we have a lot of initiatives and a lot of institutions being created by these institutions. But I think please correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot more coordination is always good. And we see some regulations that might not be conflicting with each other, but not complementing each other. So that is also an issue. And even within each ministries, even there are different departments and divisions that do different things. I guess that's that's an issue in a lot of countries, but coordination is very important, and having simple things like having the same people, for example, in meetings, to have a consistent information going through a lot of meetings is very important. So yeah, so I guess that's my takeaways. Yeah.
Been very helpful. I think Glenda, I don't know if you have a different view.
Well, as a government-owned and controlled corporation, we are really very sensitive to government policy directives. So this ETM for the Philippines really started in November 2021 during the COP26 in Glasgow, when the Philippines joined the Southeast Asia Partnership launch of the ETM. Because the government recognizes the country's outsized vulnerability to climate change. And this is our focus on promoting renewable energy and efficiency and conservation.
Vijay, please go ahead, yeah.
Thank you. Well, thank you for your question. Just like I mentioned that it is a little bit new for Cambodia to say a lot of things right now, but for me personally, and I believe also the ministry also very optimistic with this project. As you may know that, start from COP26, that Cambodia start to work and focus like mainly on, energy transition to make sure that the energy like policy align with the climate and environmental targets. That's why in 2021, we adopted the long-term strategy for carbon neutrality 2050. So in such a document, we also, mention, a very ambitious targets of energy transition works. That's why also I present that we will need a lot of like investment, and this project has come into the policy in the right times, so that it is a very like good point to start, that we have like related financing program aligned with our government policy. And also I think this is because like in ASEAN countries, since we have just only a few countries, so we can be one of the list in this transaction as well. And if we talk about the energy transition alone, it is not just only under the ETM, but we are like optimistic because we also have support from ADB under the energy sector development, energy transition sector development program so far, working on both like policy document development and also for the project development. And it focuses on not just only like the supply side alone, but also energy efficiency. That's why I think the combinations of like this transaction, it will be a very good complementarity to the government policy. Thank you very much.
Zilpat, please. Yeah.
Thank you so much. The thing that compared to other speakers, we just joined and we are just starting and we are just developing the concept. And I wouldn't say that there is huge resistance or anything like critical we cannot overcome or something like this. And I would say there is more uncertainty for ecosystem representatives, and they more ask questions rather than just resisting. Of course, they are more concerned, if we say from the policy making, how much is going to change, who is going to take care of it, and et cetera, and et cetera. We're talking about as alternatives as a sandbox, and this is heavy for the legislation system. We talk about the international trades when we talk about CBAM, for example, and they say like, it's inevitable. We have to do something about it, right? We also think about, we tightly work with the World Health Organization and with the UNICEF, and we evaluate and try to understand what will be the impact if we don't do something about it, and they are supporting us. Business and enterprise, I was the one meeting with the Chamber of Commerce and discussing with them. They all say, yeah, it's all about P&L. And we say it's okay because based on P&L, you guys pay salaries, right? And it's fair. And another case is the education system. We don't teach people, children, students, something based on new technology. When we talk about the students in the schools, they also have certain mindset that they will go in 20 years work to the coal mining, right? And they say, when we say like, you will not have to, you probably will go into the high-tech facility. And this is something also very inspiring. So there is no negative impact, but mainly uncertainty. So that is why we apply knowledge management systems and we apply innovation management systems in a collaboration. For that, we need to make sure that it is not, I call it gypsy or Frankenstein thing, because they bring like one piece from different, like, and something happens, but then when it comes to operations, fall apart because it's never been a system. So that is why when we apply any changes and transformation for the facilities, we need to make sure that we integrate with the integrated management system. So in order to do so, our foundation applies ISO 56002, which is Innovation Management Systems, and 30401, which is Knowledge Management System. And I was so happy to know that there is a lady from ADB, she works in implementing this ISO. It is really great because it's really rare when people focus on it. So we talk a lot, we write a lot, we send a lot, we produce a lot, but it's always very chaotic. And that is why nothing really works fast and effective. So I think that when we will demonstrate that it's not a danger, but mainly a saving for us, then it's going to be fine. So that is why there is no big resistance, but mainly uncertainty.
I'd just like to pass it to David as well, who's our ETM program lead and has been dealing with some of these issues as well.
Great. All right. Thanks. I think one of the responses I want to make with respect to ETM is that it's called the Energy Transition Mechanism, and I think that's really the word transition is incredibly powerful, because a lot of the work in the energy space has been very much about the clean side. And a lot of the work with respect to coal has been either punitive or remove support. Now, ETM, I think, is trying to take a different approach in saying, you know, whether it's at a country basis or at a private sector or company basis, to say, we'll meet you where you are and we'll support you to move towards clean energy. And I think, you know, a punitive approach or just removing support really lacks a lot of ways to provide momentum to countries to move towards clean energy. So I think, you know, in that respect, we of course want to support countries to make very significant commitments and changes, but at the same time, we don't want to say, all right, you have to have everything fixed before we're going to come in and support you. And I think that's really an important element to how we're approaching this. And I think very much aligned with the raison d'etre of development. You know, we know there's problems in countries. That's why we're working here to support them. And there's problems in every country. And so we have to work within imperfect environments in order to move things in the right direction. So I think I just want to add that point, because sometimes I feel like there is a desire to get everything perfect, and Dion highlighted that in his early comment. You know, we're working in an environment where we're trying to figure out how to do this, and it's very challenging. And we hope that every step we take is a step forward and room for improvement, room for input. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Are there other questions from the audience? Yes, please.
Yeah, Marie Madamba Nunez from Tara Climate Foundation. Just to follow through, I just would like to, as we have like 12 gigawatts of coal operating still in the country, we have one pilot. Are there any plans to put more under the ETM? I know we're under a liberalized framework or market, and I've heard the undersecretary say that this is going to be a voluntary retirement. So it will be a little bit difficult to do that and very challenging. So I don't know how much ADB can also get into this kind of framework wherein the government is encouraging voluntary retirement. How can ETM help in that also? And of course, like, is there a national coal phase-out policy that's being discussed also under in the DOE, so that we're looking at a more ambitious goal here, where I think we're one of the few remaining countries without a net zero commitment. So yeah, and maybe I'd like to hear more from Attorney Glenda. Thank you.
Okay, so we started with the government because the government, PISAM in particular, this is our remaining coal asset. And the government really wanted to set a precedent for the private sector to follow. So we have this pilot because this is our only remaining coal asset. But we are very cognizant that we are setting the precedent for the rest of the country. And we hope that we will be able to show that it is something that we can do and that it is something worthwhile.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Yes, in the back.
Just a rejoinder, earlier this morning, David said the responses from the CSOs are quite challenging. So a few of us are here. I'd like, it's good that, no, I mean, I'm responding to the statement that we'll meet you where you are at now. This is the ETM approach. But at the other side, where we are working with affected communities, it's so difficult to do that. We've never seen, or it's difficult for the ADB to meet affected communities with that approach. So we are really worried how public funds are being used to incentivize coal plants and use false solutions to incentivize again and lengthen the life of coal plants. For example, biomass, co-firing with coal plants, RDF with coal plants. So we hope that when we speak of affected communities, we also provide the same approach or more approach, given that climate action is also needed with the lens of human rights and meeting other social goals that are important. Hope that is an ethical question that we need to also raise when we're talking of ETM.
Just to clarify, I think that's a question to ADB, correct? Yes.
It's a question for everyone, I think. Since most of us are looking at just transition and we'd like, although we're the challenging voice, but it's for everyone to ponder when we ask, when we do just transition mechanisms.
I'm going to ask my colleague Ayato Kurokawa to respond. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So my name is Ayato Kuroka from ADB, working on the energy transition mechanism, mainly in the Philippines. So I think the question I think you said was addressed not just to ADB, to everyone. So, but let me sort of also try to provide kind of my perspective. I'd like to kind of build on what David said earlier. You know, we're living in an imperfect world, and ADB, as the Asian Development Bank, we're trying to fix those things one by one. There was a slide in the morning presentation where we presented the different steps of ETM. We start with the phase 0 to phase, I think, 3, starting with the pre-feasibility study, you know, full feasibility studies, doing pilot transactions and scaling up. Now, we can't go to the scaling up of, you know, shutting down coal plants, having this perfect policy of a you know, of a law to, you know, fully get rid of coal plants. We can't go that in one step. We need to do step by step. And I think that's exactly what we're trying to do. And given the challenges of the climate change, we need to use all the resources, all the technologies that could potentially help in mitigating, in mitigation. So I know there are different arguments on some of the new technologies like, you know, ammonia or hydrogen. But then if it's sustainable and if it's reducing CO2, GHG, let's work with that. Let's study that. Maybe we may have to do a few pilots. We may make a few mistakes, but we need to continue trying and we need to make progress.
I also want to highlight that you just said that affected community and how difficult is to deal with them in terms of energy transition. So what I want to say that the interventions with the people who will be affected should be fair. I don't know if you are if you ever tried, but there is a method, we call it ADKAR. And also we say that when we build a new knowledge and engage people into the process of the change so that they will play a role and they will in the process accept it somehow and will, as we say that usually in our case, how we suggest also we would like to see it and we want to leverage that from the ADB, I mean ADBI, there should be a very high reliance onto the research and science when we plan or review something. And this approach already demonstrated in other types of transition that it can lead to some positive results in terms of knowledge management, innovation management, transformation management, and everything relying to the science so that we don't rely on some like illusion data. And this is when you build the trust with the affected community and they will join you in the change process.
Thank you. Are there other questions from the audience? Yes, please.
Yeah. So I greet you all and thank you. Maybe it's working. So thank you for very interesting presentations and very insightful speeches. And so we have met on some of you, I know some of you on some of the forums in Bangkok, here in Manila and in other countries as well. We discussed a lot about the institutional and legislative frameworks and even the implementation of the targets by 2030s. And so it was very valuable input even today and these 2 days in interventions from your sides, from the panelists. However, there is one concern I would like to mention here, and I missed to say my name and surname. I'm Omar Zereteli. I'm representing the Georgian, by the way, the Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development. I work for the energy issues. And from the governmental perspective, for instance, we are really champions in adopting so many laws and regulations, and we are transposing the directives into our national legislation. We are the part of the and contracting party of the Energy Community Secretariat, and we are doing a lot in harmonizing our legislation with the EU one, and huge efforts is addressed in this direction. However, of course, the adoption is one, but then it comes the implementation part. So we talked a lot about the targets and NDCs, even our NDCs, and also other strategic documents like the 2030 targets of renewable energy is quite ambitious. I would be honest here. And just wanted to know your experience. So how are you managing the implementation of those measures and activities to decarbonize even the heat or the other sectors in energy, in environmental? What is your perspective in this direction? From my experience, if the ministry adopts the laws and then the ministry takes care of its implementation, it's the conflict of interest, and so we need to have some implementation body, and I think this could be very valuable input and experience coming from your side. So how are you managing to be successful and champions in terms of the implementation and not only the adoption? So that's my question, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I would direct the question presumably to Zulpat and Vichet, if you're able.
Thank you so much. I know that it's been like several times we discussed this question with you. I will be honest. As first, I mentioned that we are just in the beginning of this process of ETM, and now we are reviewing various scenarios and how we can do it better. And to be honest, I heavily rely to more statistical approach. Also, as I also mentioned, there might be a method of sandbox. We can, it's been several times, for example, for the digitalization in our country, and we are champions in this at the moment, and in many other areas when this method effectively worked. And it's not only developing legislation and also developing like following documents, ensuring that it will be executed, focused on institutions which are involved, filling the metrics which will signal us if we are doing, following the roadmaps, how it will be involved. So we have an expertise of performing these sandboxes, but another case that when you do something you never did before, people, as I mentioned already, uncertainty will be always there. It's a huge mistake to promise success from the beginning. So I usually invite, my background, I don't know how people will react on that, oil and gas. I was the one who was building those facilities, CPFs and et cetera, in the Middle East. But every time I remember that our management, they moved us towards thinking how it will be less impactful and et cetera, and the strategy, how it will be phased out in the future, and et cetera, et cetera. There are many cases in the world when companies like oil and gas, they become energy companies, so they will transform. So there are cases, it will happen. We just need to leverage it. It depends on intention. If you have this intention, you will reach it with the right partners and right methodologies. But what I encourage our partners, please rely science and methodologies internationally recognized. Try to avoid marketable, tradable methods which never been tested on a multiple manufacturing and industrial objects. But science is a key to everything. So that's it.
Thank you.
Vichet, really.
Okay. Do you still need my answer? I'm just kidding. Yeah, you will see now. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So again, just like I mentioned, maybe it is new for us for ETM, but like for the energy sector or energy transition as general, we have so far like 3 strategy, which is the first one that about like developing a very, we can say, like conducive legislative like frameworks and policy document. And during the process of each policy document development, we ensure that all the stakeholders coming together and agree on the certain like targets or like policy, especially like every time we develop like policy, we really consider the like public acceptance, especially on the like impacts for their livelihood or the community, and by making sure that the policy is conducive enough. So it is like time to ensuring the funds. So this is like the biggest like part that we need to figure out. That's why the government like try a lot in order to make sure we attract like more investor, and also like try to attract more financial support, or maybe support in terms of technical assistance from the development partners. And last but not least, about like trying to promote our country to the world. That's why the last point is try to be more active in terms of dialogues with partners around the world. And when we come to the implementation, I think maybe Cambodia, we are a little bit like optimistic in terms of implementation, and so far they have been like there's no any like critics or like resistance in terms of energy sector development, especially energy transition development. Yeah, so far. So I think I answered your question. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, just thank you. Thank you for your input. You answered my question. We are also very optimistic in terms of the implementation, but there is no implementation body, unfortunately. And so we are working in terms of the elaboration of the relevant policy with the relevant body. Okay, I'll stop here, and thank you once again for your contribution. And if there is also any answer, I'm looking forward to getting it in. Thank you.
Yes, we have one more question. Yes, yeah.
Thank you for taking my question. I understand it's we're running out of time. But I was listening from the morning session, and then I was trying to look how this mechanism is trying to implement the just in terms of the community's perspectives. And I'm really glad that the just transition impacts presented earlier is looking into the impacts of the both indirect and the direct. I think that's a positive aspect. But I was trying to look for, during the presentations in the morning and also in this afternoon, is how does this mechanism will also look at the current impacts of the current operations of the coal-fired power plants. So people, these coal-fired power plants have already impacted land use, livelihoods, are already impacting health. And I am not seeing anywhere in the presentation in the morning and also in the afternoon, where do these communities that are already being impacted by the operations of the coal-fired power plants figure in? So where's the justice for them in this mechanism? And I'm hearing from the morning session, also this afternoon session, that we're learning by doing, we're learning while we're building the plane while we're flying it. But I think in the spirit of learning from what has already been implemented, in the spirit of also pursuing justice as we go, are there plans in the current mechanism or in the future improvements of this mechanism to also include reparations for those communities, for those people being affected by the current operations of the coal-fired power plants? Because I am assuming that the closure or the retirement of the coal-fired power plant projects can also affect whatever mechanism they also enter if they have cases with the coal-fired power plants. Now, how will that closure of the coal-fired power plant affect if they have a current case with the power plant for reparations for them? So I guess that's one piece of the puzzle that hasn't been answered from this morning and this session that we're about to end. Thank you.
Thank you. Just for the record, can you provide your name and affiliation?
Marjorie Recourse. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have, just to support, I think we have our colleague Swati D'Souza in the back, who's our focal for Just Transition.
Hi, thank you so much for your question. So you actually asked 3 questions, so let me take them one by one. So on the first question on how are we addressing the impacts that are currently happening, both in terms of health and environment. For that, the Just Transitions team actually coordinates with the Safeguards team because these are part of ADB's safeguard processes. We did this for Cirebon, by the way. And again, that document is available online. In Philippines, we've not yet started, so I can only give you examples of transactions which have already happened. So we coordinate with the Safeguards team and undertake an assessment on the environment part of it. So health, of course, comes under this sort of gray area between Safeguards and Just Transitions. Your second question was on how do we deal with communities? Sorry, if you can just summarize the second part of your question. Sure, sure. So the environment and social safeguards also has a grievance redressal mechanism based under the ADB safeguards process. And when we go for stakeholder consultation, after we've done, so we do typically 2 to 3 times assessment. And once we're done with that, we provide this email to the communities and their responses. They're free to reach out to us on this because we also monitor the plant on a year-by-year basis. So at any point, if we see that we need to intervene or the safeguard processes are not being undertaken, that's when we can address this. So that's to your second. I'm happy to engage more. I'm just giving, in the interest of time, very short summaries, and we can then take this outside in a very healthy manner, not in the way it's meant to be. So the last part of that question is how do we deal with past impacts that have happened. So as an MDB, we're a little bit constrained because we have to work within the boundaries of the national laws and legislations. So I understand your concern that we need to have a baseline. And in Just Transitions, there is this conversation on, especially on indicators, or where do we draw the baseline? Because at some point, even if everybody's won, somebody has won more than the other person. So it is an imperfect baseline. And this is an ongoing conversation and process, but we are also constrained to work within the national boundaries. So if this is an issue that we can work with the government in helping to address, then that's something that we will take up and work with in the future. But this needs to be defined through the national process in any given country. It's not just a particular country, in any given country. And we're happy to work with the government and the ministries in defining, and the CSO community and all other stakeholders in defining this. I hope I've addressed all 3.
Thank you very much for your questions. I think the key takeaways, this is an ongoing conversation, I think, with all our national counterparts and our champions in the private sector and amongst the NGOs and CSOs. I think the purpose of today and the purpose of ongoing stakeholder engagement is to make sure that we can really extrapolate the lessons learned and, you know, sort of improve as fast as possible and become as inclusive as fast as possible. So with that, thank you very much for your time, and I hope you have a good lunch. Thank you.